So it's September 10th, about time I share with you what I read in August. There were 13 books in all. 8 of them I read in physical form and 5 I read as ebooks. And I was really pleased with how my August reading went. I had more on the go that I didn't finish until the beginning of September, but 13's a pretty good number, and I feel good about what I read because I really enjoyed what I read in August. I think I only had, one book that was 3 stars. Everything else was above 4 stars. I don't really hold a lot of weight for the star ratings, but I've sort of gotten into doing them because I'm on Storygraph now. Speaking of which, if you're on Storygraph, go ahead and follow me there. I'm under the same name as my channel, An Oasis of Books, and I would love for you to be my Storygraph friend. I will tell you right now, though, that sometimes I do go back and change those star ratings, maybe a week or two later, maybe even a month or two later, because like I said, I don't put a lot of stock in them. At first, I rate them for Storygraph based on what I feel immediately after finishing the book. And then, a little while later, I think, you know what, that book was actually a bit better than I first said. Or, that really did not stick with me at all. I think I need to lower that a bit. But if I had my druthers, as they say, I really wouldn't give star ratings at all. I'd just say, I really like this book. This book wasn't so much for me. And oh my gosh, this is like the best book ever. Fortunately, in August, I had 4 books that I thought were the best books ever. So they ended up with 5-star ratings, and I'll share them with you at the end of this video. Now, some of these books I have talked a little bit about in other videos, and if that is the case, I will mention that as I go along. And I will also link those videos down below in the description. So let's get started with these 13 books that I read in August. Now, the 13 books I read cover a wide variety of genres, so if you're not that interested in the first genre I'm talking about, stay tuned because one of the other ones I bring up later probably will be something you like. So the first set of books I'm sharing with you are cozy mysteries. I have a reread my favorite cozy mystery project going, and I sort of altered it a bit this past month by deciding to add in a few new cozy mystery series to the old favorite ones I'm reading because, well, I don't want to miss out. I want to keep up with all the new cozy mysteries as they come out, or if not, the year they're published, at least within a couple of years. So in August, I read 3 of my old favorite cozy mysteries, book number 1 in the series, rereading to see if I enjoy them just as much, and I started 3 new to me cozy mystery series. Let's talk about the new ones. Well, we've got Kneaded to Death by Winnie Archer, and this is a bread shop mystery series. There is so much about this book that I really loved, especially the descriptions of the bread making. I love to make bread, though I haven't been doing it as much lately as I used to, and this was just so nostalgic for me, very much put me in the kitchen with the bakers, and I really loved that. Now, this book is sort of in a special category in that even though it's a new series to me, I'd actually read book 1 before. But I want to read the whole series, so I thought I would start over since I hadn't read this in a few years, reread book 1, which I really liked the first time I read it, and then go on from there. And what surprised me is that I didn't like it as much this time. Like I said, I do like parts of it a lot. But other parts didn't hit me the same way, especially the way the main character seemed to be a bit just too fixated on the grief she was feeling over her mother's death. Now, my own mother passed about 15 years ago, and so I'm familiar with the grief that you go through for a death of a close parent like that. And I'm not saying it wasn't done well. It just, for whatever reason, this time I read it seemed to be a little too much for the type of feeling I'm going for when I read a cozy mystery, which is a bit more lighthearted. Now, I'm not sure why it didn't hit me that way the first time I read it, and there are so many other aspects about it that I love, so I did give it a 3-star, 3.3, 3.5, and I am going to continue on with the series because I'm hoping that the main character gets over that a bit, you know, so it's not so much a part of the story, and that I can really get into the bread making and the mystery part of the story. Having said that, all the other books I read were 4 stars and above, so let's look at them. So the second new to me cozy mystery series I started was a costume shop mystery. The protagonist is Margot and the setting is in Nevada, and it's, well, at a costume shop. This was fantastic. It had so many quirky characters and interesting, unusual elements to it that I can't wait to read more of it. If you like some sub-characters with a bit of substance, a little bit of Nevada UFO flavor, and a character that loves to dress in a different costume every day, then this might be the series for you. The third new to me cozy mystery series I started is the Cheese Shop Mystery. Now, the main character in this series is Willa. She is a cheesemonger who owns her own cheese shop here in Northern California. This is written by Korina Moss, and it is very highly reviewed and by both, you know, strangers all over the internet and a lot of people that I personally know, either in real life or through BookTube. And everybody loves it. So I was, well, going to it with some pretty high expectations, and I'm happy to say that it didn't disappoint. I really enjoyed this book. The setting is great, the descriptions of the characters are great, and the descriptions of the cheese are great. I'm learning a lot, and well, the mystery was well done too. This was just a super top-notch cozy mystery, and I can't wait to read the next ones. The first of my old favorite series that I reread this month was book number 1 in the Grace and Favor series. This is by Jill Churchill. It only has 5 books in it, so it's a shorter series. I think I'll finish it before the end of the year because yes, I'm gonna keep reading it. I will say that I liked it more the first time I read it. It was one of the very first cozy mysteries I ever read. And let's see, when was this published? Because I got it right when it was published. 1999, yeah. And it is set just after the Great Depression. It's a brother and sister who had been supremely rich, but now they are not. And they inherit a mansion, really, but there are strict requirements for them to actually own it. They have to do some things. And while they are, you know, learning to do those things and learning to live a life quite different than what they were used to before the crash and the Great Depression set in, they learn that their great uncle Horatio, who left them the mansion, actually didn't die in a boating accident, but was probably murdered. And so they start investigating, and it's quite a funny book. If you've ever read anything by Jill Churchill, as I have read a few of her other works, you will know she is quite the comedian, and this series is no exception to that. It only went down slightly in my estimation based on probably the number of other cozy mystery series I've read since then. And also there were a few, very few comments in the book or phrases in the book that were a bit, well, not really the best. The way, for instance, that the characters refer to the homeless people, which of course there were a lot of during the Great Depression, was a bit too flippant for my liking. And I didn't feel like that was, you know, in character with these characters, or if it was, I didn't really like that about these characters. But I remember that I did love these characters throughout the series, so I'm thinking that they grow emotionally, as you would if you suddenly went from being rich to having to work for a living. This brother and sister are very close, very loving, and they learn to see people much more on an equal basis than they ever did back when they were rich. Now, the other 2 cozy mysteries that were old favorites of mine that I reread book 1 for, I'm going to save for the end of the video because they were 2 of my 5-star books. Now, I do talk a little bit more about those 6 cozy mystery series in a video I did back in August, and I will link it down below if you want to hear a few more details about those books. I did read another mystery in August, and I did a video on it too. It's the Thursday Murder Club. The video I did compared the book to the movie that recently came out starring Helen Mirren and Pierce Brosnan, among other great actors. And I won't even start to tell you about the comparison because you can watch that video if you'd like. But I did love this book. So what did I love so much about this book? I think it was definitely the characters. Richard Osman does a fantastic job letting us get to know not only the 4 main characters, but also many of the sub-characters. There is quite a diverse array of characters, and I'm assuming that will be the case throughout the series, and I love that. I love that sub-characters aren't just shadows or flat cardboard figures, but real people. And I really felt that in reading this book. And the 4 main characters, he gives quite a bit of time to each one of them. We see what's happening from the different perspectives, and they're all quite different than each other, very distinct. That's also enjoyable, and they work really well together as a team. I also feel like the setting, the luxury retirement setting, is almost like another character. It is so well described. It's so gorgeous. It's such a part of the plot that you really couldn't do without it. And that is one thing, by the way, the movie got right. The setting, oh, it's just like I pictured it. Already, I am enjoying the second book in the series so much. It doesn't disappoint at all. It just keeps getting better, really. And if you think you might enjoy a mystery with older protagonists that has quite a bit of convoluted plot line throughout, I mean, these mysteries are not simple. They are a bit tangled and interesting to figure out. If that sounds intriguing to you, go ahead and give the Thursday Murder Club series a try. I really think you'll like it. All right, for something a bit different, for my personal California history reading project, I read Contest for California, From Spanish Colonization to the American Conquest by Stephen Hislop. This takes place from 1769 to 1848. So this covers basically exactly what it says it does, from the Spanish coming in and colonizing the California territory to the Bear Flag Revolt in 1846, which ushered in a temporary California Republic, as it were, and the Mexican-American War, where the United States claimed California as its own territory, and then we finally did annex California in 1850. So this gives me, as a person who studies the California Gold Rush incessantly, voraciously, lovingly, it gives me so much great background information. It uses a ton of primary sources, and Stephen Hislop does a fantastic job at looking at what happened from many different perspectives. So from the Native Americans, the Native California Indians, the, Mexican administratives here in the territory, to, the Anglo-Americans coming over. There were few and far between because the gold rush hadn't happened yet, but they were here and there, usually establishing ranches out in the middle of nowhere, to, the Californios. And he also doesn't just look at the really, famous or important big events. He also looks at everyday life amongst all these different people and how they got along with each other, which was remarkably well in most cases. It was really the outsiders coming in to take over who incited so much violence and sadly gradually changed the attitudes of many people and encouraged the conflict. So I really enjoyed this book. I love having well-written, dependable, reliable, reputable nonfiction to be the backbone of my research, much as I love supplemental historical fiction to bring it to life. Hislop did a great job bringing the characters, the people in this book to life, just in, his own writing style, backed up by lots, again, as I said, of primary resources. And now let's talk about the week in August when I decided to ignore my TBR, ignore all my projects, and just do some mood reading. And I did do a video about this mood reading week, so I will link that down below. And I won't go on at length about these 4 books, but I do want to share them with you because they were great. The first one was Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. This was a dystopian Western LGBTQIA plus inclusive, and very unusual. I've read a lot of Westerns. I've read a lot of dystopian books, but I'd never read anything quite like this. It's a short read too. I was able to read it in one day and I really liked it. It was very enjoyable, very thought-provoking. Perhaps the target audience is a little bit younger than me, but there were characters in it that were my age, so I didn't have a problem reading it, enjoying it, and it gave me a lot to think about. It's set in the near future of the US and the country's at war, and basically it's a fascist government that is controlling everything. And the revolutionaries in this dystopian future are librarians. And that's all I'm going to say, but if it sounds at all interesting to you, definitely check it out. Again, it's a quick read, but super good. Now, the second book I read during my mood reading week was a thriller, but I'd been told that it was a thriller without a lot of gore and not too scary, which is how I like my thrillers. This was called The Night Shift by Alex Finley, and it was great. It had a, not really a dual timeline per se, but it had two crimes, and they happened, I think it was 15 years apart. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it was. And the question was, were these two crimes related? Was the perpetrator of these two mass killings the same person? It sure seemed like it. So the survivor of the first crime, which was a murder of several young female workers and their young male boss at a video game shop at the end of the night shift. The survivor, 15 years later, I believe, is a therapist, and she specializes in working with survivors of traumatic crimes like this one. And this second murder takes place also at the end of a night shift, leaving several young women dead and one survivor. So the therapist, the survivor of the first crime, goes and talks to the survivor of the second crime, and potential links are quickly discovered. So this book is told from a few different perspectives, which I thought might be confusing, but it wasn't. And it really kind of keeps you guessing all the way to the end. I thought I'd figured some things out, but not completely. And most of the characters, if not all of them, are interesting and likable. And for a thriller, I really enjoyed this. The third book I read during my mood reading week, as I'm calling it, was by Matt Haig. And it was called How to Stop Time. This was a speculative fiction book, a little bit of historical fiction in there, because the protagonist, Tom Hazard, is over 400 years old. So he was born just after 1600, and we see his life, snatches of it, glimpses of it here and there, as he was a young man. And then we see him in the current time period, when he is really kind of depressed because he's outlived everybody he's known and he doesn't see any hope for the future. And this book sort of explores his past and explores the idea of what can he do to give meaning to his life, and is there something he hasn't done that maybe he should do now. There are other elements within this book that create conflict for him, but I'm not going to go into that here. You need to read the book. I was really happy with this book overall. I love time travel books, and while this wasn't time travel, it sort of gave me that feel because it kept going back and forth between the 1600s and then even later, other periods in his life when he was older. You get a real feel for what everyday life was like in those different periods, even though you're not there for very long. So if this kind of speculative fiction book strikes your fancy too, I encourage you to read it because Matt Haig is a really good writer, and I think he'll keep you entertained from beginning to end. The fourth and final book that I read during my mood reading week was Letters from Yellowstone by Diane Smith. And this is the first of the 4 5-star books that I read in August. I absolutely loved this book, so much so that as soon as I finished it, I looked Diane Smith up and I went out and purchased her other book that seems very similar to this one. And I also went and found some other used books that have to do with women naturalists early in American history, just like this one. She really ignited a love for studying women naturalists in me. But this is all about Alexandria, and she is a young woman with a love for botany who joins up with a field study in Yellowstone National Park right after it had become a national park. This is set in 1898, and what makes this book unique, well, there's several things. One of them is that it's an epistolary novel, which I have always said I don't really like, but I don't say that now, because now I've read 2 or 3 books, including this one, that I really love that are epistolary in nature. So she, Alex, writes letters to her mom and dad. She writes letters to her best friend, Jessie. She writes letters to colleagues back at Cornell, where she was studying medicine. And other main characters and a few sub-characters in the book also write letters that really let you see their thinking and, their feelings and some of the stuff they don't share with the other characters. The people in this field study are quite diverse in pretty much every way, and yet they all share a love for nature. There's a lot of ecology in this book, really deciding to establish and then even more so go on to protect Yellowstone as a national park from all the other capitalistic interests that wanted a part of the resources there, was the beginning of the environmentalist movement in our country here. And so I found this fascinating. And more than that, though, just the way that Diane Smith brings the characters to life and creates this found family in this gorgeous place that she describes so well, out in the middle of nowhere, back in history. It was just both lovely and so unexpected. I can't recommend this book highly enough. I will tell you, though, it is slow paced. It is not an action-packed thriller. It is not a mystery with clues every which way and a new murder every other chapter. It is much more written along the pace of nature. And there is stunning beauty in here, both in the writing and in the nature described. So if this sounds at all interesting to you, I suggest you find it and give it a try. The next 5-star book that I read in August was historical fiction. It was set in England during the English Civil Wars and started in 1642. And this book was written by Minette Walters. It was called The Swift and the Harrier. And I had, first of all, never heard of Minette Walters before. And secondly, had never really studied the English Civil War period. Right now, I'm actually doing a personal project on the Plantagenets, which came quite a long time before the English Civil War period. But I must say, I really learned a lot and really enjoyed this book. Now, I was reading it, and now I'm reading the sequel to it, as part of my Historathon Quarter 3, which is set in this time period. And although the Historathon is focused on nonfiction, I wanted to read a few supplemental fiction books to go along with the nonfiction cores I was reading that were covering the English Civil War. And so I picked Minette Walters' book based on a recommendation from Kim over at A Book Forest, who had read the sequel that I'm currently reading, The Players. And I decided to start with the first one. And oh my goodness, Minette Walters is now one of my absolute favorite historical fiction authors. I love her writing, and I loved her character, Jane Swift. And I loved the other main character, William Harrier. Now, Jane, unusually, but not unheard of during this time period, was a doctor. And she wanted to remain neutral during the Civil War. She didn't want to side with the Royalists, which Minnie and her family did. And she also didn't want to side with the parliamentarians, sometimes known as the Puritans. She wanted to treat everyone and anyone that needed her help, and she wanted to stay neutral. William Harrier, on the other hand, is a much more complicated person, and it takes you a while in the book to figure out much of anything about him. He's very fascinating from the beginning, but he has many sides to him. He's like a chameleon. And after a while, you do get to know what he's all about, and you like him even more. And this follows their journey through the entire Civil War. So it's not a fast-paced book, but I was very impressed with how the author, Minette Walters, did in taking you through different chunks of time. She also did a fabulous job in displaying what the normal, common, everyday people were going through while this drawn-out war was happening. And she did a great job showing how the women supported and protected their cities, their towns and villages while the men were off fighting. She also did a great job displaying the weariness, the overall just I'm done with this feeling that these people were experiencing after years of the war. And this was a pretty savage war. And so I can't recommend this book highly enough if you love historical fiction, if you love a great, strong female protagonist, and a really good male co-protagonist too, and you're into learning new parts of history, or maybe you've already studied the English Civil War, but you've never read any historical fiction about it. I think you would enjoy this even more because you're going to understand all the background information, but yet have it sort of filled out, fleshed out by these characters and how they interact with each other and with the important, well-known figures that occasionally appear in the book. So yeah, definitely a 5-star read, and I am enjoying the sequel, The Players, just as much right now. And finally, my last 2 5-star reads in August were 2 of my favorite cozy mystery rereads. The Amelia Peabody mystery series, written by Elizabeth Peters, set in Egypt. By the way, the author was an Egyptologist, so this explains why this is so authentic. And the Coffee House mystery series, written by Cleo Coyle. This is a long-running series. In fact, I think these both have 19, 20 books in them. I'll put it up on the screen. But yeah, if you really want a good series to sink into that's going to go on for a while, that you can rely on to be well-written, to be funny, to be interesting, to both have diverse cast of characters. Even though the Amelia Peabody series started at the end of the 19th century, while the Coffee House mystery series is set in modern day US, in fact in New York City, they both are done so well, so enjoyable, and they did not disappoint at all upon rereading. You know, sometimes books you read 10, 20 years ago just don't measure up anymore. You find things in them you didn't see the first time, or just your tastes have changed and they no longer appeal to you as much. But guess what? These are still great. So yes, these 2 make up my 3rd and 4th 5-star reads of August. Last month was a great reading month for me, and I'm happy to report that September is going the same. I am already reading so many good books, and I love the fact that I'm an eclectic reader because it means I have a variety of genres to choose from. You know, whether it's historical fiction or science fiction or nature writing or cozy mysteries or several other genres. There's just something for whatever mood I'm in, and that has been just a lot of fun this year, really taking advantage of that. In fact, just yesterday, I reorganized a few of my bookshelves in the other room to be sort of a buffet for me to choose from for the month, for this month, September, and for next month, October. And you know, it is totally not set in stone. I will be adding to and taking away from and mixing up those books. But I love having that visual buffet right in front of me instead of stacked up in different places around my room. And yeah, it just reminds me of how many fabulous books there are to read this month and next month. Now, how was your reading in August? Did you have any 5-star books? What was the favorite book you read in August? Let me know in the comments below. You know, if you do comment below, you can be sure that I will answer you back because I always do. And often it's with a kind of long comment, so be prepared. I'll be back soon with another video. This one will be a used book video, over 20 used books I'm so excited to share with you. But until then, let me wish you some very happy and interesting reading in September.